I start to present myself. Most of you know me, I think. I'm Andrea. And also my two colleagues, Mariana and Alexandra. We are from Consensus Group, and from the IM Campus. And this is an IM Campus webinar. What are we doing? Our vision really is to teach mediators, to provide mediation, to help people in critical situation, in conflict situation, with dialogue and with all kind of other interventions. And we met, I think it was in August, right, Suhail? Was it August or September?
September.
September.
It was in September.
September. Yes. We met Suhail and his colleagues in Berlin, or Alexandra was in Berlin. I was online. And we exchanged some ideas, and it was so interesting to us what Suhail and Bahrain Foundation is doing, that we thought we should give you the possibility to learn about it. And yeah, this webinar is about a dialogue, and this is what the foundation is doing. Suhail, I think you're going to explain that a little bit better and more about it in a couple of minutes. But from what we have learned in our exchange, it is about to create spaces and to give people actually the tools and the rooms and the safe spaces to get into dialogue and to find resolution of conflict, to find peace, but also to exchange and to stay in touch, or to get to know each other on a level of constructive dialogue. And I think that is, and it's not only a job. This is what we felt when we met. It is a passion, really. And Suhail and the colleagues, right, are very, ambitious and creative in this regards. Our speaker today is Suhail. You see him, and I hope I pronounce your name right.
Yes.
It's Suhail.
Yes. It depends. I mean, some say Suhail, some say Suhail. Both is correct. You're not far off.
Okay. Thank you. And you are, and I have a very long list now of things that you have made, and it's very, very impressive. I think to keep it short, I would call it, you are an entrepreneur, a consultant, an activist, and helped a lot of startups actually to find their purpose and to conduct them to a business. I also understood that you had a lot of awards in this regards, and you are a TEDx speaker, so you might want to share the link later on for your TEDx, so then people can watch it. This is, and I see, the room is filling up. Everybody who just joined in, welcome to this webinar. We are very happy you're here. This webinar will work like this, and some of you have already seen other webinars with us, but I'm going to hand over in a minute to Suhail, and he's going to tell you about his work with the foundation and about case studies they have done. And then please collect all your questions you have and everything that you want to share, maybe yourself. And we have plenty of space. The last 20-25 minutes, we will have the room for you to ask your questions. And this could be done either by writing into the chat, and I'm going to read it out then to Suhail, or you just open your microphone and you ask your questions. Okay, so then welcome. Thank you so much again, Suhail, for your time, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Andrea. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the intro. It's my pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you to IM Campus and the Consensus Group for hosting us today. And I want to maybe share the founding story of the Bahrain Foundation for Dialogue, how we started, where we are today and so on. But I want to give a little bit of background first. So I'll just try and first of all sort out the put it in presentation mode. If you give me a moment here to just sort that out. Good. I believe my slides are showing. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. First of all, I have to admit, I do not consider myself a mediation expert, so I don't know how much I can teach the participants here things, but I do want to sort of share lessons from Bahrain in our civil dialogue and reconciliation initiatives. It started way back on the 18th of February, 2011. Back in 2011, I published a blog post that would subsequently change my life, actually. And I published it 4 days after the painful February 14th crisis rocked the Kingdom of Bahrain. At the time, Bahrain was one of the countries affected by what was then called the Arab Spring. And like many Bahrainis, it broke my heart to see the social tension, the sectarianism, and polarization the crisis created in our beloved country. I've been blogging for a while. At that time, blogs were perhaps a bit more popular than they are now. And it was the first time I ever actually blogged about politics. In the past, I would write about business, about entrepreneurship, things like this. But I decided, I couldn't stay silent. So I wrote a blog post and it went viral around the world. It was in English. It was shared thousands of times on Twitter and Facebook by people all around the world. And people in the news were hearing about Bahrain and they were Googling, and my blog post came up. And I was one of what was then considered one of the few voices that were so-called moderate or seeking a more reconciliatory tone. Before the crisis, I was happy being an entrepreneur, and it never really occurred to me to voice my opinion on politics, let alone become an activist. You could say I went from being an entrepreneur to what I later called a reconciliation activist, and today maybe I use the word dialogue advocate a bit more. But the crisis that hit our country in 2011 and the act of voicing my opinion in my blog took me down a fascinating path. The crisis led me and some friends to start the Bahrain Foundation, or what was then called the Bahrain Foundation for Reconciliation and Civil Discourse, which is a non-political, non-profit, and non-partisan foundation dedicated to promoting civil reconciliation and social dialogue in Bahrain. Later in 2016, we renamed it the Bahrain Foundation for Dialogue, or BFD. Here you see, I'll just bring out the laser pointer. Here you see a younger Suhail here in the middle, and these are some of my colleagues that came with me to Berlin. Also, the Bahrain Foundation for Dialogue is the only foundation of its kind to be endorsed by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, who's also the Prime Minister of Bahrain. So I wanted to share some of the lessons I learned along the journey. I don't want to get into all we did in the last few years, but sort of some of the key lessons along the journey. And if there's anything that's not clear, by all means, gather your questions. And as Andrea very kindly mentioned, I'm happy to answer any single question at the end of my presentation. I'll try to be done in under half an hour so that we allow enough time for Q&A. Like I said, it took me down a fascinating path. This is us in Northern Ireland, in front of the Northern Ireland Legislative Assembly. This is here with one of the key speakers in Bahrain. This is us signing an MOU in the World Tolerance Summit in Dubai. This is with one of my reconciliation heroes, which is Rolf Meyer, who was one of the key architects in South Africa in the transition from apartheid to a democracy. We went on a learning visit to South Africa, and I have to say the people that went and came back were different people. It was such a profound visit for us. So I want to share 17 lessons when it comes to working in this field. My first lesson is don't wait. Don't wait. I'm influenced by the saying of Edmund Burke. He said the following: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." It is my view that it's every single person's responsibility, if you are living in a country of crisis or a community of crisis, it's everyone's responsibility to try and help the situation and to make a difference. You cannot, under any circumstances, remain silent. It's everyone's responsibility. And this saying, I'll repeat it because of how powerful it is, and it's one of my guiding principles. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Of course, by today, we would say good people to do nothing. Of course, we have to take it in the context of the time. Lesson number 2 is develop clarity and decide. You must make 3 vital decisions or ask yourself 3 vital questions. If you're going to be an activist, if you're going to be someone that wants to work in the reconciliation and or dialogue space, number 1 is you need to decide what is the outcome that you want to achieve. Some of you, I'm sure, read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by the late Dr. Stephen Covey. And habit number 2, he says, begin with the end in mind. Some people start moving and acting and so on without actually really being clear what they want. It's really important. Begin with the end in mind. What is the outcome that you want to achieve? Once you know your outcome, you need to decide what is my role in this outcome. And number 3, a very important question you need to ask yourself is, what are you willing to sacrifice? If you are living in a community or a country of crisis or in a region of crisis, is it that you want to have the downfall of the regime, for example, something that what's happened in Syria very recently, of course, that's top of mind for many of us. Do you want to reconcile with the other side? Do you want to be a bridge builder? Do you want to be an advocate? Do you want to be a protester and just voice your anger? So you need to know what you want. You need to know your role and what are you willing to sacrifice? Because in some countries, the sacrifice is big. There's the risk of, at the extreme end, there's risk of death or arrest and torture. I have a friend in Chile who was an activist during the Pinochet regime. They tried to assassinate her twice. Once they put, I think it was either a spider or a scorpion in her car. One time they tried to run her off the road, and it was actually her neighbor who actually was trying to kill her and run her off the road. The price I paid personally in those days, there wasn't really the risk of being arrested, but there was certainly the risk of defamation and of character assassination. And that happened in spades. And there were hate campaigns that ran against me because the role I tried to play was of mediator, of promoting reconciliation and promoting understanding of the other side. So I was trying to play the middle ground or be a moderate. And that made a lot of people very, very angry. And so there were articles written about me, attacking me, hashtags on Twitter. Twitter was relatively new at the time, and everyone was on Twitter in those days. There was hashtags created about me. The opposition in London wrote articles about me. It was quite the price I had to pay at the time. So you need to know, what are you willing to sacrifice? If your heart is not into it, that's also fine, as long as you're honest with yourself. But if you say, I'm in a troubled community, I want to do this or that, and here's the outcome of that, but I don't want anyone to offend me or anyone to attack me, it doesn't work like that. So just be very clear of what you're willing to sacrifice. In some places of extreme crisis or violence, of course, the risk of death is very, very real. If you have 2 angry extremes, you need to decide, where are you on this spectrum? Are you pro something? Are you against something? Or are you in the middle trying to be a bridge builder? There is no right or wrong position. You must do what is right for you. You must work with your own convictions. During the Bahrain crisis, we sort of had the government on one side. You had the street protesters on one side. There was many street protesters, and mainly from the Shia community here in Bahrain. And what I try to do is I try to be a middle ground, a middle voice, if you like, here in the center. And the reason I put this photo is because I was mainly online, and that's when they used the word social media activist or online activist. I didn't call myself an activist. That's what the media started to call me. So with my blog and my activities, I was in the center. When the violence in the streets increased and some of the calls changed from reform to fall of the regime, I said, no, this is not what I believe. I veered towards the right, if I may say so. We called it the right and left at the time. And I became very pro-government. And my own view was that evolution, but not revolution. Once the crisis was more under control and the violence subsided and went down, I went back to the middle, trying to sort of have a middle voice, a moderate voice. Some on this side did not forgive me for my stance of going to the right, but I don't believe that regime change is ever a right thing to do, especially in our region. Lesson number 3, reconciliation starts with you. You have to really look in the mirror, and you have to be at peace with yourself before trying to promote dialogue and reconciliation. Sometimes what happens is someone says, well, the problem isn't with us, or I'm okay, but it's those guys. The moment that figure comes in, and they're not even conscious of doing it, but the moment you do this, moment the finger points, you are part of the problem. And most people don't realize it, that they are part of the problem. So if you want to be in this space, you have to have that inner peace. You have to be reconciled with yourself. And we've seen it where people pretend to be this or that, but really they're trying to undermine the other side. It doesn't work like this. This is not for everyone. And that's why I said there is no right or wrong position. There's the position that is right with your convictions and your values, if that makes sense. Yeah. Lesson 4, exclusion is the main driver of conflict. This is mentioned by Tim Phillips. Tim Phillips is the founder of the peace organization called, oh my goodness, the name escapes me now. I'm sure it'll come to me before the end of the session, I hope. And so when a group or a ethnic minority or a religious grouping or whatever feel that they are excluded, that's when conflict arises. And sometimes the conflict is over natural resources, sometimes it's over power, sometimes it's over religion, and so on. So the moment there's a group that feels excluded, conflict can arise. And us humans, we have 4 basic needs. We have the need to be valued, we have the need to be loved, we have the need to be accepted, and the need to be safe. If those are not provided, opposite emotions occur. Things like shame, things like fear, and things like anger. And if one doesn't, if a person feels that they do not fit into society as a whole or are not part of a national, let's say, agenda, and that they are excluded, they fall back on their own grouping, their own ethnic group, or their own religious sect, etc. And that's when they start thinking of me and them, or us versus them. And of course, there's the emotion of hurt. Lesson number 5, if you're being attacked by both sides, you're doing something right. The first time I heard this saying is by His Royal Highness. I sat with him at the time and explained what's going on. And he's the one that first said, if you're getting it by both sides, you're doing something right. I subsequently heard others say this as well. And so I guess I was really doing something right, because I was definitely getting attacked by both sides. So you had a side saying, you want us to reconcile or make peace with these troublemakers, these terrorists, those people that are trying to destroy our country, these people that are driven by outside sources or that are influenced by Iran, or this. Or others might say, you want us to reconcile with the bullets that are being shot at us. You want us to reconcile with the people that are excluding us. You want us, and so on and so forth. So, and like I said, there was hate campaigns from different sides on social media against me. It bears to remembering that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And I think that's such a wise saying. And some of us, perhaps like me, are Star Wars fans. And so the rebels are always seen as the good guys, right? Especially in Star Wars folklore. But what if the rebels that are fighting for freedom also commit rape? What if they also commit murder? What if they also go to a village and they'll kill all the residents in the village there? Are they still freedom fighters, or are they terrorists, or are they a bit of both? There are no good guys or bad guys in the real world. Everyone perceives themselves as the good guy. Even those that have committed unspeakable acts of violence, torture, and murder think they did the right thing. It's quite shocking, actually, when you go into this, and everyone justifies their actions. And every crisis has 2 or more narratives. So in Bahrain, there was 2 narratives. One was this is a peaceful uprising of the people of Bahrain asking for reforms. The other narrative was that this is a group of extremists that have led the youth astray, and they're led by outside forces that are planning to overthrow the regime and create an Islamic republic. So if you look at some of these photos here, was it peaceful protests like we see on one photo, or were they violent riots here, which is a police car being attacked and burned by a Molotov cocktail? In Bahrain, were there citizens demanding freedom, democracy, and human rights, or sectarian uprising fueled by outside interests? So you have some Shia religious clerics going on a march, and for the Sunni community, when they see Shia protests, they get shivers down their spine and they think of another Islamic republic. Was it about positive change, or was it about the overthrow of the regime? So if people felt equally passionate about each narrative, and if you're in this business, it's not your role to judge, but to build bridges. Lesson number 6, peace is an ongoing process, not an event. And again, we had the pleasure and the honor of going to Northern Ireland, learning from them. We had the pleasure of going to South Africa. And I remember when we went to Northern Ireland, we met with former IRA members. So for the younger members of the audience, the IRA is the Irish Republican Army, which was a terrorist group that fought to liberate or to free Northern Ireland from Great Britain or from the United Kingdom, to be free of the British government. And I remember as a teenager in the 80s, I'm showing my age now, hearing about the IRA bombed this location or this station or this airport in the UK or in Britain. And then to want to actually sit with them and learn from them directly was quite the thing. And so a peace requires a lot of work before the peace event and a lot of work after. That's why they call it a peace process, not a peace event. If you look at in Northern Ireland, they have these walls, they call them peace walls, which separate the communities, the Catholic community from the Protestant community. Most of these walls, interestingly, were built after the Good Friday Agreement that led to the peace process in Northern Ireland, which is quite fascinating. So it's an ongoing process. It's not an event and you're done. You need to keep working on it. Lesson number 7 is negative peace is better than no peace at all. What is negative peace? And again, I don't know if this is something that's covered in your curriculum, and I apologize if I'm stating the obvious. This is where you have the absence of violence, but the underlying issue has not been resolved. And you've heard the word conflict resolution. You've heard the word conflict transformation. So sometimes you transform a conflict from being a violent conflict to a non-violent conflict. So in Northern Ireland, some of the underlying issues are still there, but at least now they're discussed in Parliament in a civil manner, or let's say mostly discussed in Parliament, or as they call it, the Legislative Assembly, mostly discussed in a calm manner. Lesson 8, 3 ingredients are needed for post-conflict social reconciliation. Number 1 is a sense of security, leaving violence behind as a means of solving differences. 2, an element of truth-telling is needed, which involves the acknowledgement of past wrongs and to some extent construction of shared understanding of history. And number 3, there must be some recognition that justice has been done through punishment or reparation or both. And sometimes you don't have full justice. I think I'm actually going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, so let me not waste time on this. Lesson number 9, focus on the facts. And this is a really powerful concept. When people are emotional, they jump to conclusions and can interpret things in different ways. Whenever a discussion gets emotional, people start disagreeing because of their perceptions. We try to always bring the conversation to the facts. For example, let's say 20 people died, for example, heaven forbid, of course. And we can interpret, we can try to accuse, we can try to extrapolate, or we can just say, all right, let's focus on the fact 20 people died, for example, and it's a tragedy. Now, how can we move forward? Lesson number 10, it's vital to engage the youth. A society that has a disengaged and disenfranchised youth is a society in trouble. In the MENA region, around 2/3 of the population is under the age of 30. And of course, by MENA, we mean Middle East and North Africa. Engaging the youth can be done through music, technology, and sports. Lesson 11, hate and violence come in easy steps. If you're told to avoid someone, it's a small step to hating them, and it's just a small step to fighting them. There are, according to Dr. Ghislaine Lisi, who's a good friend of mine, there are 5 levels of genocide. First, there's avoidance. Then there's verbal abuse. Then discrimination. Then violence. Then murder and genocide. And what we see in areas of extreme conflict or extreme violence or conflict that has gone into violence, what one side does is it dehumanizes the other. For human beings to commit violence against another human being, it's very difficult. It goes against their values. But if they don't see the other side as being fully human, it makes it a lot easier. So if we look at German history, and I'm half German, my mother is German, my father is Arab. If you look at during the Nazi regime, they dehumanized the Jews. And often calling them rats and calling them all kinds of dehumanizing words or descriptions so that it becomes easier to commit violence against them. It's the same thing when the Nazis invaded Russia, for example. They called the Slavic people Untermensch, which I guess means subhuman. And so it's easier to commit violence against a subhuman that you view similar to an animal as opposed to doing it to another human being. Also, if you look at Rwanda, the Hutu called the Tutsis cockroaches. It's easy to kill a cockroach, but it's hard to kill another human being. So it's very important that we monitor in our society what is the verbiage and language being used. Is one group avoiding another? Does it lead to verbal abuse? Does it lead to discrimination? Does it lead to violence and eventually murder or genocide? Lesson 12, justice is not always achievable for all. And this is such an important concept that really, when I finally understood it, it was sort of profound for me. So, for example, if you look at the gold standard for reconciliation, which is in South Africa, till today, few people in South Africa feel that they did not receive justice. Also, same goes for Northern Ireland. Many feel that justice was not done. Also in Chile and other places. And so some experts say society should seek as much justice as possible, but complete justice is not always achievable. Sometimes it's not achievable from an admin perspective. If you look at the genocide that was committed in Rwanda, hundreds of thousands of people were arrested. It would have taken decades just to process them and to bring them to trial. It was logistically and financially impossible to put all of these people on trial. So what they did is, I'm sure some of you have heard the word transitional justice. So they had these gacaca trials, these community trials that they did, and they had people do, building houses and so on and so forth as punishment, but rather than go through the proper legal system, which would have been impossible at the time. Lesson 13, often the hardest people to convince are your own people. And if you look at here, what I've done is, this is in the chessboard, it's actually a king surrounded by his own people that are rising up against him. So it's happened that leaders are willing to negotiate with the other side, but the other side is willing to do the same, but the leader's followers are not ready, and it will derail the dialogue or peace process. They can even sometimes depose the leader or replace him or her. This has happened in Northern Ireland. I forget which leader it was, to be honest. About our friends in Northern Ireland, they tell us that this has happened. The details escape me, I have to admit. This was done also in the 1970s when President Sadat of Egypt decided to make peace with Israel without consulting the Arab countries. And this upset them, and they actually removed the headquarters of the Arab League. They took it out of Egypt and moved it to Tunisia. I'll try and speed up a little bit. I love this definition of leadership. Good leadership is disappointing people at a rate they can absorb. So sometimes you got to disappoint your followers for the right reason, but doing it at a rate that they can absorb. Lesson 14, it's all about relationships. This is a photo of now President Cyril Ramaphosa and Mr. Rolf Mayer, who I mentioned earlier. They were two key figures, because one was on the apartheid side, a minister, and one was an activist with the ANC, the African National Congress. And it was the fact that they often would get together behind the scenes and smooth things over when at the time he wasn't president, but when Nelson Mandela and President de Klerk were at sort of a deadlock, those guys, because they built a relationship, built a friendship through their combined love of South Africa, they managed to really help transition the country. Of course, today, Mr. Ramaphosa is the president of the country. And this is a photo of myself back in 2015, a younger Suhail with a somewhat older Rolf Mayer from the photo that was taken. In fact, leadership is all about relationship. And I love this definition of leadership by the Oxford Leadership Academy. They say leadership is about relationships. The conversation is the relationship, which I thought was a lovely way of saying it. And I remember some years ago, I heard an interview on the BBC, and one person said, after we started to talk, we became friends. This was a FARC rebel talking about a Colombian army sergeant during joint landmine removal project. So if you recall, the FARC rebels were a sort of anti-government faction that was around for many decades. And some years ago, they finally had a dialogue and reconciliation process between them. The FARC became a political party and entered politics. It laid down its weapons. And they had these joint army and rebel sort of events or initiatives to remove landmines. And they just started talking to each other. But the simple fact that you start talking to the other side, you start understanding them, seeing the world through their eyes, and realize they're not a monster, they don't have three heads, and they can become friends. Lesson 15, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This is by Dr. Viktor Frankl, and I'm sure many of you know the story of Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was an Austrian Jewish psychiatrist, the third Viennese psychiatrist, if I may say so. was arrested and taken to a Nazi labor camp. And he endured all kinds of hardships. And I'm sure some of you are aware of his book, which is called Man's Search for Meaning, a very powerful book. And so he had this epiphany that I can't change where I am. There's nothing I can do about the circumstances, but all I can do is change my perspective on it. So if you cannot change a situation, change your perspective on it. Lesson 16, dialogue, in my humble opinion, is the only way out of a conflict, regardless if the conflict is political or you have a conflict at work or at home. Dialogue is the only way out of a conflict. Might be tiresome and tedious, but it needs to be done, and it needs to be ongoing. So what are some of the keys to effective dialogue? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Again, this goes back to the book of the 7 Habits by the late Dr. Stephen Covey. And this is really something I live by, to really try to understand before being understood. Focus on the facts, as we mentioned, as much as possible. Be honest. Honesty leads to trust, but not necessarily to liking. How do you know if you can trust someone? Is if they're honest, regardless if you like them and regardless if you like their politics. So I believe it was during World War II, when people were dealing with Stalin, with all the atrocities Stalin committed, it is said that if he said something, he would actually do it, right? So honesty is so important. Be patient, extremely patient. This is a patience game. This is a long-term investment. And you really need to work on yourself. Work on the practice of non-judgment. Notice, but do not judge. Also, meditation might be something you want to consider. And I don't say this lightly. I'm someone who meditates daily. And inner peace is so important if you're going to do this. And if you are trying to lead some sort of initiative and you're being attacked by both sides, remember, they are angry at the situation. It's not about you. It's not about you personally. It has nothing to do with you. So you need to really be able to practice the art of non-judgment. I've been doing this work now for 12 or 13 years. I'm fairly good at it. I have to confess, I've not reached that point of perfect Zen where nothing affects me ever, but I'm generally getting good at it, if that makes sense. Compassion. Compassion is a strength, not a weakness. And I love what I heard from a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She said, bullets are the weapons of the weak. I want to also draw attention to a documentary called The Gatekeepers. This is a 2012 documentary where 6 former heads of Israel's Secret Service agency, the Shin Bet, discussed their organization's successes and failures since the Six-Day War in 1967. It's quite chilling, actually, in some of the things they've done. And they speak very frankly about the horrific things that they've done. But here's what I found really interesting and why I bring this up in this conversation. Interestingly, they were all pro-dialogue with the Palestinians. One even said that he was pro-dialogue with the Iranians. Why did they say this? These people are very, very practical. If they think murder will work, they will murder. If they think torture will work, they will torture. And if they think dialogue will work, they will advise on pursuing dialogue. And this is what, of course, happened in the early 90s. Dialogue happened between the Israelis and the Palestinians, what was then called the peace process. Of course, that's all in the past. But dialogue is a really powerful thing. It's the same thing that happened in South Africa. The Secret Service is the one that actually went to the government and said, look, this is not sustainable. We have to change something. And they're the first ones to have reached out to Nelson Mandela in prison to gauge the taste for dialogue and for reconciliation and for moving forward. Lesson 17, this is by Nobel Peace Laureate Betty Williams. She said, a person cannot be lifted out of despair until you show them a little hope. So my final thoughts are, keep hope alive. Everything is impossible until it's done. Never despair. If everyone does their bit, things will inevitably improve. And I believe this very, very much. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. Reconciliation, dialogue, or societal improvement is everyone's responsibility. In our value system, in our Islamic value system, in my own value system, is once we die, we get judged by the Almighty on what we've done. And I want to be able to speak with a clear conscience. Hope leads to action. Action leads to change, and change leads to results. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much. And please, I see some hands up here. It was so interesting. I would love to discuss every single principle you mentioned, but I give the
We'll
room
only
to
sit for 17 hours then,
yes, that's it.
Andrea, and discuss all of them.
I give the room for, I think there are a lot of questions. I already see Rabia.
Hello, Andrea. Hello,
Hi.
Mr. Suhail. And
Hello.
greetings from Beirut, Lebanon.
الله يكون في عونكم. أهلا ربيع, حياك الله.
Shukran. Mr. Suhail, I would thank you first of all for this inspiring and insightful presentation. It was very, very interesting to listen to you today. Well, my question is going to be very simple. Where does the Bahrain Foundation for Dialogue stand from mediation? And we know very well that mediation is a tool for a process dialogue and for communication. And we know very well that there was a law in Bahrain that was enacted in 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, that was regulating mediation. So where does the foundation stand from the law of mediation nowadays? Thank you.
Thank you for your. Should I answer now, or do you want to accumulate questions first?
Yes, I think it's better to answer right away because I think there will be questions from different directions.
Sure. Thank you for your question. And by the way, we went to different learning visits. Like I said, Northern Ireland, we went to South Africa, and we went to Lebanon, actually.
Really?
And I think, and I believe in Lebanon, is it 19 official sects? I believe. And so between Muslim and Christian sects and subsects. So when we went back to Bahrain, we said, Alhamdulillah, we only have 2 sects. These guys have 19 different sects that they try to all live in harmony with. I think mediation is a very important tool. I would say that mediation and dialogue are siblings, or at the very least first cousins. But mediation, I would say, is a tool, a very important tool. The law that was reached in Bahrain was in the context of the legal system. So the law encourages you to go to mediation before you go to court. That way, it saves time, it saves costs, and you need to be certified mediator, I believe, like your good selves. So it's a legal tool and a legal process that is there. So we are talking beyond legal matters. So I think if there's a dispute, oftentimes people don't want legal mediation. They just want someone to speak to, someone to listen to them, and so on. So one of the activities we did a lot in the early days, we called them dialogue dinners. We had people come over that would normally not sit together. These were very, very powerful experiences. And if we ever do this again, and maybe we can get into more details of these. And the most cathartic process for everyone was the fact that someone listened to them. It wasn't about mediation, it's about being heard and listened to. But I think both are very, very important. And thank you for your question.
Thank you so much for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Nauman was next, and then Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sohail, for this wonderful session. My question would be, from your experience from Bahrain and a case study, and which is very interesting as well. To introduce myself, I'm from Pakistan, and I just want to understand that since Rabi also put this mediation question, that why mediation is important, and there's a commonality between dialogue and mediation. So in Pakistan, there are a lot of issues from sectarian violence to religious conflict to terrorism. So we are engulfed in a lot of different issues. And we know the stakeholders who are involved in this sort of at the helm of it. They want to reconcile, they want to bring peace. But at times it derails, the process derails. And also I want to highlight the recent issue of Pada Chinar, which is close to the border of Afghanistan. It is in the province of KPK. So there is this constant violence going on between the Sunni and Shia communities there. But out of all that conflict, the thing is coming out that it's a sectarian violence, but sometimes it's also because of land dispute, because of the government do not want to intervene. So as per your experience, how can this sort of conflict can be addressed because we see that we don't have a lot of experts in this area who can actually work in peace mediation. The only two stakeholders that is working is the government and those tribal leaders that are involved in the conflict. So this is one of the issues. So according to your experience throughout this process, how that issue can be addressed?
Thank you, Naaman, for your question, and I want to sort of be really clear about something. Is that each country and each society has its unique circumstances, and I would hate to come across as the expert and says, look, here's what you need to do. So I don't have a savior syndrome, and it's a danger if someone does have that. So based on what we discussed, Naaman, a couple of things. One is ask yourself these three questions. What is the outcome that I want? What is the role I am going to play? What am I willing to risk? Okay. And so if I were there, and so it matters a lot whether you're a victim or not, because if you're a victim, it's very hard to have a reconciliatory tone if you're angry. I know people who are tortured that were more at peace than their families. Sometimes the secondary victims are angrier than the primary victim. Okay. So it's important to ask yourself these three questions. The other thing is, I would say from a practice perspective, I think if I were there, I don't know, but I would say, who on the other side can I meet for coffee or for dinner? Just communicate. Okay. Just speak and be, seek to understand before being understood. Is there someone from the other side I can invite to dinner? If you're playing the role of mediator or in, dialogue facilitator, who are two people I can invite for dinner? And say, guys, I'm just interested. What is this all about? Can we, and then that conversation might lead to the two of you or the three of you saying, you know what, maybe we can do this again. Can you also bring a friend? Can you bring, and then we do it something bigger. Let's all meet together over dinner in my house or someone's house, and let's just listen to each other. And it can grow from there. And often these things, like I said, it's an investment. It takes months or years. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But there is no easy solution. Dialogue is the only solution. But if you're not a politician, and which I am not, and this is what we decided to do in the Bahrain Foundation for Dialogue, is to work on the social side. There's a political crisis. It's above our pay grade. So let us work on the social side. We have Sunni Shia tensions. Let's work on this. And like as you saw today, we had 100 what was the number? I forget now. 280 something events, 13,000 people come in and so on. 13,000 isn't a lot that you can, for Bahrain, it's a lot. For Pakistan, it's a tiny number, But I'm happy for you if you want to reach out to us and we can give you more thoughts on this. You're welcome maybe to come to Bahrain, do our Taysir program, and then see how you can take this knowledge back home. Thank you for your question. And I'm reminded of a story, again, in Lebanon, we met some peace building organizations. And I remember one gentleman who said that he wanted to work in a sort of remote village in Lebanon, somewhere in the mountains. And he says, once a month, I would just go to them and say hello and leave. The next month, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam, until they finally said, come here, we actually need you. We need you to help us solve some issue. But all he was doing is saying hello, building relationships, and so on and so forth. So this is a long-term game. And my view is, when I was younger, as you see some of the photos, my beard was a bit darker. Now it's mostly white. When I was younger, I actually thought we could do a huge impact. We always said if we want to impact one person, we would be successful, but we obviously hoped for more. But now I realize societal change comes through a collective effort and a cumulative effort. So if you work, if one organization or person can do 0.01, and someone else does 1%, someone else does 0.2%, someone does, and over time, enough people work on small fractions and work together, you can affect political change or societal change, rather, excuse me. One more thing I'll say, and I know there's other questions, and I'm happy to go over time depending on yourselves and Andrea and the team. If you are going in a certain direction, and if you can change society's direction by 1%, just 1%, in a positive way, in a better way. 1% today will make a difference, but over 20 years, it'll actually be a huge gap. Yeah. So thank you and good luck.
Sarah.
Yes, hello, and thank you, Suhail, and thank you, Andrea. It was a lovely webinar. Okay, just briefly, my name is Zara. I'm an Iraqi lawyer and a mediator. Something that really caught my attention that I've been trying to work on, Suhail, is targeting the Iraqi youth and encouraging them to pursue other things, especially law students. See, in law school, I spent 4 years in college trying to reach out to other students and get them to solve their conflict through dialogue and mediation or arbitration, any sort of conflict resolution that's away from litigation. And I've suffered some resistance, probably from the youth themselves. I've tried workshops, I tried seminars, I tried some kind of slideshows, but nothing seems to work. And I don't know, I'm looking for tips. Any tips you have for me, like to get them going?
Again, are you clear what the outcome is that you want? What is it that you actually want them to do?
I want them to get out of their comfort zone, you know.
What does that mean?
Getting out of the okay, so in the southern part of Iraq, there's things called a tribe culture. So sometimes when people have conflict, they would not seek litigation or a simple dialogue between each other. They would choose these other parties to solve it for them. So I feel like our people unintentionally go through mediation and go through these conflict resolution issues, but they don't do it themselves and they don't do it in the right way. So I want the Iraqi youth to learn these ways and learn to communicate effectively without these old-fashioned ways like litigation or, the old system.
So what I'll say is you might want to experiment with, again, I don't have the answer, Zahra, but you might want to experiment with a dialogue dinner where you invite a youth and university students, you give them a free meal. That's pretty much a good incentive to start with, right? And you want to, and sometimes you start with an open question, like, so you might have, and make sure you invite from the different factions, if I may say so, right? Be it Sunni, Shia, be it, whatever, pro this or anti that, bring the different factions together in a safe setting. It is really, really vital that it is a safe setting and it is perceived to be safe and that
Safe
they understand.
In which way? Sorry.
Meaning that no one can come back to them and say, oh, I heard you went to this place and you said this and you and that. Oh. There's no recording, there's no cameras. So if you search Bahrain Foundation for Dialogue in English and Arabic, you'll find a ton of stuff online. You will not see one single photo of a dialogue dinner. Not a single one. We did many, many dialogue dinners, invited the who's who of Bahrain, not a single photograph that we did. If it weren't for the witnesses, people could deny they even existed, right? But we wanted a safe place for them. And Abbas and I, the good-looking man that you see wearing the red ghutra, we had arguments, or should we do photos or should we not? Should we change it? But I always insisted that this product or this event should be really safe and private. We should never have any photos taken. So if they feel it's politically safe, it's physically safe, it's a safe space to speak. And you said something, Zahra, about I'm trying to get them to do this. I don't know what you meant by trying, but if you say, come on, let's do this, that's already the wrong approach, if I may say so, which is sit them down together and say, how come we have so many problems? And you just moderate the discussion, facilitate it, give people 3 to 4 minutes to speak. If you're not a good facilitator, let someone else facilitate, give them time. The dialogue dinners, we do about an hour or 45 minutes pre-dinner. Then we break bread together and after dinner, and you would be amazed. People exchange numbers, they smoke a cigarette outside together, and all of a sudden they have. And just listen. Your role is nothing more than to just listen. Take this input that you have and see what the next dialogue dinner is. Can you bring other people like you? Can you create some sort of a non-profit society? في البحرين نسميها جمعية أو مؤسسة. I don't know what you call it in Iraq. And also, Zahra, I would invite you and any Arabic speakers here to attend our next Taysir event in Bahrain. It would be so on. The reason I'm just signaling her out is we usually do them in Arabic. There will be an English version. That's why the invitation isn't open to everyone just yet. Abbas, if you can put your email in the comments, please. All right, Zahra, it would be an honor for you to visit and see how this program works. Do the training with us, and then we can see.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry?
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for your question.
Sarah, can I add something to it? Because we have a common friend organization, Suhail and Consensus, and that is CRISP in Berlin. And actually, we did a project together with CRISP, Consensus CRISP, and that was a project from the GIZ in Iraq. And we trained 160 young people in mediation to do peer mediation. So they were trained over, I don't know, in total 80 hours of mediation, and the group went in different groups and so on. It was a long project over 2 years. And if you're also interested in this, please reach out. We can give you some information about what happened there, who were, and connect you to CRISP as well.
Of course, that
So
would be
ju-
wonderful. As I said, I'm
just to-
working in mediation advocacy.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And just to build on what Andrea was saying, we worked with CRISP. They came to Bahrain. They did a simulation, a 2-day simulation for us. We're now planning to incorporate a similar simulation session as part of our program, as part of the curriculum. We're not sure yet if we'll implement this in 2025, at the latest 2026. But regardless, I think the CRISP simulation will help, and our program will also help as well.
Thank you. Thank you both.
In fact, we have quite a number of our members from Bahrain with us today. So I'm very proud to have our members online, and we have even some of our trainers that are actually on this call today. So they would be delighted to have you visit in Bahrain.
There are 2 more questions, and as we are a little bit over time, I would say goodbye to everybody who has to leave. I know there is always other dates back to back in our Zoom jumping society now. But there are 2 questions, and so Hail, if you allow, I would like to read it out to you. One in the chat
Sure.
from Robert. He said, from your experience in Bahrain, can anyone launch a dialogue process in a highly polarized and political settings? What are the prerequisites for someone to stand up and engage a dialogue between disputants seen and plant the seed for trust?
So first of all, just to put things into context, Bahrain, I forget the exact phrasing that was used, but today it's not a highly tense situation anymore. We were back in the day, and so the first few years of it things were very tense in Bahrain, and Shia Sunni sensitivities were probably at their highest. So the situation is now not the same. I would also caution about, again, it was a longish question, so forgive me if I don't remember the exact phrasing, but something about standing up and doing a dialogue process. I would actually not advocate standing up and doing a dialogue process. I would advocate subtlety. And so sometimes, dialogue and leadership, let's say dialogue advocacy and being a leader also means keeping your ego in check. And so I would, if I were to start a dialogue initiative, I would be very subtle about it. We were not subtle about it. That was a strategic decision we made, and we were endorsed by His Royal Highness. Had we not been endorsed by him, maybe we would have been a lot more subtle. But we were on the front pages of everywhere. So I would be subtle. I would start to try to identify people that believe in what I believe in, and I'd start mapping out who should be speaking to who, and start working on this in a low-profile, subtle manner, and build from there.
Thank you. And last question goes to Haifa. Haifa Sudani, you're muted. Okay, maybe something went wrong with the connection. Then,
Hello.
oh yeah, here you are. Please.
Hello, see me? Okay. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Haifa Sudani. I am a lawyer from Tunisia. Sorry for my English, because my first language is Arabic and French, and the language is the third language that I speak it. Just I want to thank you for your amazing opinion about the justice and the affairs of human rights and Just I want to see as a Tunisian that we have the experience in our country of the transitional justice. In Tunisia, after what we call the revolution in 2011, there is a transitional justice. Me as a lawyer, I have some affairs that I treat with the tribunal. Yes, and the relation between the transitional justice and the mediation is very close, because before we go to the tribunal, to the court, there is mediation. Mediation make a very good role in resolving the problems and the rights of people who were perhaps we in Tunisia we haven't the problem like in Bahrain between Shiite and Sunnite. We haven't that problem in Tunisia, but what we have is political opinions. Some people who are against the regime, they were tortured. They go to jail. They come to they are refugees in other countries, in the European countries. So when the revolution of Tunisia in 2011 started, there is a transitional justice that that plays a big role in for the people who were perhaps who were how we say in people who haven't rights in the ancien régime, في النظام القديم اللي هو معناتها for the people who were oppressed in Tunisia. But I have just the last thing that I can do. Unfortunately, in Tunisia, the transitional justice with what happens after the revolution, it didn't get what we want to get. We aren't very happy about the justice in Tunisia. That's what I want to say. And I'm sorry for my English, because it's my third language, not French or Arabic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
شكرا
Thank you for
شكرا بارك
sharing your
الله فيك.
experience.
شكرا على تدخلاتك وعلى آرائك الجيدة. الحقيقة أعجبت برأيك. شكرا دكتور.
شكرا لك.
بارك الله فيك. شكرا. الله يسلمك.
I guess that was thank you, and I also want to
No,
say,
we were talking badly about everyone in the group. It's all right.
yes. I want to say thank you to everybody who joined, for your presence here, for your questions, for your interest, for listen and understanding what others are doing. And I want to thank you so much, Suhail, for all the inspiration and insights you gave us today. And we definitely keep in touch and see what we can do together, and also what we can present together to this community. Some of the participants already talked about mediation and dialogue. I think it's closely connected. You see, mediation, of course, mediation, there is a court annex mediation part that is very much into the court system. It's about justice, also sometimes access to justice. But of course, in mediation, there is also a big transformative and transformational part. And this is what we are teaching at the IM campus as well. And I'm looking forward to projects together. And thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you.
Both of you, Abbas, also for being here, and all the other trainers and people from your foundation. It's a wonderful work. I'm really inspired, and thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you all for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very
Goodbye.
much.
And for everybody else, we will have also our next webinars. Look at our website, and hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.